What if everything you've been told about ADHD is wrong? For decades, people believed ADHD was simply a lack of discipline, a condition that made children restless, adults distracted, and students unable to sit still. Some called it laziness. Others blamed bad parenting. Many even believed it wasn't a real condition at all. But modern neuroscience has revealed something completely different. The truth is, ADHD isn't a motivation problem. It isn't an intelligence problem. And it certainly isn't a sign of weakness. Instead, it's a completely different way the brain processes attention, motivation, rewards, and self-control. Imagine sitting down to finish one important task. Your laptop is open. Your phone is silent. You know exactly what needs to be done. You genuinely want to start, but within seconds, your mind drifts somewhere else. A random thought appears, then another. You suddenly remember something that happened 3 years ago. You reach for your phone, just for a moment. One notification becomes 5. 5 minutes become 30, and before you realize it, an entire hour has disappeared. Now here's the strange part. People watching from the outside see someone who isn't trying. But inside the ADHD brain, a completely different battle is taking place. A battle that most people never see. Because ADHD isn't simply about paying attention. It's about controlling where attention goes and whether you can bring it back. To understand why, we first need to explore one of the most extraordinary objects in the known universe, the human brain. Inside your skull lives nearly 86 billion neurons. Each neuron forms thousands of connections with other neurons. Together, they create one of the most complex communication networks known to science. Every second, trillions of electrical and chemical signals race across your brain. These signals allow you to think, learn, remember, plan, control your emotions, and stay focused on a goal. But none of this happens automatically. Your brain must constantly make decisions. What should you pay attention to? What should you ignore? What deserves your mental energy? Imagine walking through a crowded city. Cars are moving, people are talking, phones are ringing, music is playing, lights are flashing from every direction. Yet somehow, you can still hear your friend's voice. That isn't magic. It's your brain filtering information in real time. Every single second, your brain decides what is important and what can safely disappear into the background. Without this filtering system, life would become overwhelming. This invisible process happens every moment you're awake, and for most people, it works so smoothly they never even notice it. But for someone with ADHD, this system doesn't always operate the same way. The brain may assign attention differently, making distractions feel louder, more urgent, and sometimes impossible to ignore. Which raises an even bigger question. If attention can be controlled by the brain, then what exactly is controlling the brain itself? The answer begins with tiny chemical messengers, invisible molecules that quietly shape every decision you make. And among them, one stands above all the others: dopamine. What if I told you the biggest myth about dopamine is that it makes you feel pleasure? That's only part of the story. In reality, dopamine is far more important than happiness. It's one of the brain's most powerful decision-making chemicals. Every second of every day, your brain is asking one simple question: what deserves my attention? That decision is heavily influenced by dopamine. Think of dopamine as your brain's priority system. It doesn't just reward you after something happens. It helps your brain predict what might be worth doing next. Imagine 2 different tasks. The first, scrolling through social media. Bright colors, endless videos, constant surprises. Every swipe offers something new. Now compare that to writing a report, studying for an exam, or organizing your room. The reward is much farther away. Your brain has to work first before receiving anything in return. For most people, the brain can stay motivated because it predicts that future reward. But for many people with ADHD, that prediction system works differently. Immediate rewards often feel much stronger, while future rewards feel distant, almost invisible. That's why starting a boring task can feel surprisingly difficult. Not because the person doesn't care, but because the brain isn't generating the same level of motivation. This isn't a character flaw, it's biology. Now let's travel to the front of the brain, to a remarkable region called the prefrontal cortex. If your brain were a large company, the prefrontal cortex would be the CEO. It plans, organizes, makes decisions, controls impulses, keeps long-term goals in mind. And most importantly, it helps you stay focused when distractions appear. Imagine trying to read a book while someone keeps knocking on your door every few seconds. Eventually, you lose your concentration. For many people with ADHD, the brain experiences something similar. Distractions don't simply exist. They compete for attention with much greater intensity. Brain imaging studies suggest that communication between the prefrontal cortex and other attention-related networks can function differently in people with ADHD. That doesn't mean the brain is broken. It means the brain is organized differently, and those differences can change how attention is regulated. Here's another way to picture it. Imagine driving a high-performance sports car. The engine is incredibly powerful, acceleration is almost instant, but the steering is extremely sensitive, and the brakes don't respond as smoothly as expected. The car isn't weak. In fact, it's incredibly capable. But controlling all that power requires much more effort. Many neuroscientists use similar analogies to explain ADHD. The challenge isn't a lack of intelligence. It isn't a lack of potential. The challenge is regulating attention, choosing what deserves focus, and maintaining that focus over time. But then researchers discovered something even more surprising. If people with ADHD struggle to focus, why can many of them spend hours completely absorbed in one activity, forgetting to eat, ignoring notifications, and even losing track of time? This strange phenomenon is known as hyperfocus, and it may be one of the most misunderstood abilities of the ADHD brain. Imagine becoming so deeply absorbed in a single activity that the outside world simply disappears. Hours pass, but to you, it feels like only a few minutes. Your phone rings, you don't hear it. Someone calls your name, nothing. You forget to eat, you forget to drink water, you even forget what time it is. This incredible state is known as hyperfocus, and it's one of the biggest reasons ADHD is so misunderstood. Think about it. If someone can focus for 8 straight hours on a video game, a creative project, or a topic they absolutely love, how can they possibly have an attention disorder? The answer is surprisingly simple. ADHD is not a disorder of attention. It's a disorder of attention regulation. The brain doesn't struggle to focus. It struggles to decide where that focus should go and when it should stop. When something feels exciting, novel, emotionally rewarding, or deeply interesting, the ADHD brain can lock onto it with extraordinary intensity, almost like a spotlight that suddenly becomes impossible to move. Researchers believe this happens because the brain's reward system becomes highly engaged. Dopamine activity increases, motivation rises, and attention becomes incredibly stable. But there's a hidden cost. While hyper-focused, the brain may begin ignoring almost everything else: time, responsibilities, hunger, sleep, even important conversations. This leads us to another fascinating phenomenon: time blindness. Most people experience time as a steady flow. Minutes become hours, morning becomes afternoon. But many people with ADHD describe time very differently. There is now and not now. Future deadlines can feel strangely unreal until they suddenly become urgent. This is why many people with ADHD don't start an important task until the very last moment. It's not because they don't care. It's because their brain doesn't always experience future events with the same sense of urgency. Then something interesting happens. As the deadline approaches, stress hormones increase. The situation becomes emotionally intense. Suddenly, the brain shifts into action. Energy appears, focus returns, and work that seemed impossible yesterday gets finished in a single night. To someone watching from the outside, this looks confusing, but neuroscience suggests there's much more happening beneath the surface. Now think about today's digital world. Social media, short videos, constant notifications. Every swipe delivers something new, something unexpected, something rewarding. These platforms are designed to capture attention, and for an ADHD brain, that constant stream of novelty can become incredibly difficult to resist. But here's an important point. Enjoying social media does not mean someone has ADHD. And having ADHD does not automatically mean someone is addicted to technology. The two are not the same. However, many experts believe that modern digital environments can make existing attention challenges even more difficult to manage, especially when the brain is constantly searching for the next source of stimulation. Understanding this difference is essential, because ADHD isn't about being lazy, it isn't about lacking intelligence, and it certainly isn't about choosing distraction. It's about living with a brain that processes motivation, time, rewards, and attention in a fundamentally different way. But if that's true, can this condition actually be treated? Can the brain learn to manage attention more effectively? And why do medications help millions of people around the world without changing who they are? The answers are more surprising than you might expect. For years, scientists believed ADHD was simply a behavioral problem. Today, we know it's far more complex. Modern brain imaging has revealed that ADHD involves differences in how certain brain networks communicate and regulate attention. The brain isn't missing anything. It isn't damaged. It simply processes information differently, and that changes everything. So, can ADHD be treated? The answer is yes, but perhaps not in the way most people imagine. There is no single cure for ADHD. Instead, scientists focus on helping the brain regulate attention more effectively. One approach involves behavioral therapy. People learn practical strategies to organize tasks, reduce distractions, break large goals into smaller steps, and build routines that work with their brain instead of against it. Another approach involves medication. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of ADHD. Many people believe ADHD medications simply calm people down, but that's not how they actually work. Most ADHD medications help increase or regulate the activity of neurotransmitters such as dopamine and norepinephrine in specific brain circuits. The goal isn't to change someone's personality. The goal is to help attention control networks communicate more effectively. For many people, the difference can be remarkable. Not because they suddenly become more intelligent, but because their brain can finally direct its attention where they want it to go. Of course, medication isn't the right choice for everyone. Treatment is highly individual, and decisions should always be made with qualified medical professionals. Lifestyle also matters. Consistent sleep, regular exercise, structured routines, mindfulness, and reducing unnecessary distractions can all help support attention and self-regulation. These strategies don't replace professional care, but they can become valuable parts of a long-term management plan. Perhaps the biggest misconception about ADHD is that people simply need to try harder. But imagine asking someone with poor eyesight to see clearly without glasses. Willpower alone can't solve every biological challenge. The same idea applies to ADHD. Understanding always comes before judgment. And that's exactly why awareness matters. Millions of children, teenagers, and adults spend years believing they're lazy, broken, or simply not good enough, when in reality, their brain has been working differently all along. A different brain doesn't mean a lesser brain. History is filled with people who thought differently, solved problems differently, and changed the world because of it. ADHD is not a superpower, and it isn't a weakness. It's a neurodevelopmental condition with real challenges and real strengths. The more science uncovers about the human brain, the more we realize that attention isn't controlled by willpower alone. It's shaped by biology, experience, environment, and incredibly complex neural networks that researchers are still trying to fully understand. The human brain remains the most complex object we've ever discovered, and ADHD reminds us of something remarkable. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't hidden in distant galaxies or inside black holes. Sometimes, they're hidden just a few centimeters behind our own eyes. And perhaps, understanding the brain is the greatest journey humanity has ever begun.